She sat at the piano as a joke butt when her fingers touched the keys. Laughter turned to tears, and a roomful of strangers discovered the power of a forgotten heart. The office was always full of sound-ringing phones, tapping keyboards, and people talking about deadlines and meetings. But in the middle of all that noise sat Mara Lim, quiet as a whisper. She worked as an administrative assistant in a tall glass building in Singapore. One of those modern offices where everyone moved fast and dressed perfectly. Mara was always on time, always polite, and always careful. She spoke softly, smiled gently, and never caused any trouble. Most people saw her as the kind of person who did her work well, but didn't stand out. She had a neat desk in the corner near the big window. A small green plant sat beside her computer, and sometimes, when no one was around, she would hum softly while sorting documents. Her coworkers joked that she had a radio inside her head. They didn't know that music had once been her whole life. But Mara never talked about that part of her past. Every day, she arrived before everyone else, made coffee for the team, and started replying to emails. She was the one who remembered birthdays, fixed the printer when it jammed, and stayed calm when others panicked. To her bosses, she was reliable. To her coworkers, she was invisible. It didn't bother her much. She liked peace. She liked silence. But deep inside, she carried a feeling like a piano locked inside. Her heart that hadn't been played for years. Mara used to dream about being on a stage, wearing a white dress and playing under soft golden lights. She could still remember the feel of piano keys beneath her fingers, the smoothness, the weight, the sound that came alive when she touched them. Her mother used to say she was born with music in her veins. When Mara was little, her mother would sit beside her during practice, clapping softly when she got a difficult part right. Those were the happiest moments of her childhood. But everything changed when her mother passed away suddenly. Mara was only 15. After that, the piano became too painful to touch. Every note reminded her of her mother's smile. She stopped playing completely. Life moved on, but her love for music stayed buried deep. Like a secret she kept even from herself. Now, years later, she worked for one of the biggest companies in the city, a luxury real estate firm, owned by a billionaire named Mr. Han. He was known for his success, his charm, and his huge charity projects. People in the office talked about him all the time, but Mara had only seen him from afar during meetings. One morning, the company announced a big celebration for Mr. Han's 60th birthday. It would be held at one of the city's most beautiful hotels. There would be fine food, famous guests, and live music. Everyone in the office buzzed with excitement. Mara's manager assigned her to help organize the event. She had to take care of small but important details, checking the guest list, confirming the musicians arranging flowers, and managing stage schedules. While others complained about extra work, Mara quietly did everything with her usual patience. She stayed late, making sure every invitation was perfect. The more she worked, the more she felt a strange excitement growing inside her. She hadn't been to a big event in years, and though she would only be behind the scenes, something about the idea of music playing in a grand ballroom made her heart beat a little faster. On the day of the gala, she wore a simple navy blue dress. Nothing fancy, but it suited her calm personality. She arrived early to check that everything was in place. The tables glowed under golden lights. The stage looked elegant, and in the center stood a black grand piano, shining like a mirror. The sight of it made her stop. Her eyes stayed on the instrument for a few long seconds. She felt an ache in her chest, the kind that comes from memories too deep to explain. She walked closer, pretending to check the microphone setup, but really, she just wanted to look. The piano reminded her of her old one at home, the one covered with a white cloth untouched for so long. She almost reached out to touch the keys, but quickly pulled her hand back. Someone called her name, and she turned, forcing a smile as the evening went on. Guests began to arrive, businessmen, celebrities, and government officials. Everyone was laughing, talking, and enjoying the luxurious party. Mara stayed near the backstage area, managing the flow of events. She felt invisible again, which was fine. She liked watching rather than being watched. But inside, something stirred every time she heard the faint sound of music from the speakers. It reminded her of what she used to be. Once, people had clapped for her. Once, her music had made people smile. Now, she was just part of the background, making sure things went smoothly for others. Her coworkers, especially one named Eric, often teased her for being too quiet. Eric liked to joke loudly, especially after a few glasses of wine. He was the type who always wanted attention, even if it meant making others uncomfortable. That night, he was in an especially playful mood, laughing with the managers and making little jokes about everyone. When he passed by Mara, he said, "Hey, Miss Music, why don't you sing for the boss tonight? You're always humming around the office." He laughed, and others joined in. Mara smiled politely, but didn't answer. She was used to being the quiet target of such jokes. Still, the comment made her cheeks burn a little. She turned away, pretending to focus on the clipboard in her hands. Later that night, the hired pianist was supposed to arrive before dinner started. But as the minutes passed, Mara got a message on her phone. The musician's flight was delayed. There would be no live performance for at least another hour. She quickly told the event coordinator, who frowned in frustration. The schedule was tight, and music was supposed to fill the background during dinner, while they were discussing what to do. Eric overheard and laughed again. "Why don't we ask Mara? She probably knows Twinkle Twinkle Little Star." A few people chuckled. The billionaire, who had been walking by, stopped and smiled curiously. "Who's Mara?" he asked. Eric pointed toward her. "Our quiet assistant," he said jokingly. "Always humming. Maybe she can entertain us until the real pianist shows up." Everyone laughed politely. Mara froze, her face turning pale. The billionaire's eyes, kind but sharp, rested on her. He smiled. "Do you play, Ms. Lim?" he asked gently. Her throat felt dry. She wanted to say no. She hadn't played in years. The thought of sitting at that piano in front of all those people made her heart race. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The billionaire chuckled softly. "Don't worry, it's just for fun," he said. No pressure. The people around them smiled expectantly. Mara looked at the piano again. The glossy surface reflected the golden lights of the room. Her hands trembled slightly at that moment. She didn't know what scared her more, though. Possibility of embarrassing herself for the feeling. That the piano might awaken something she had tried to bury long ago. The laughter around her faded into a blur. Her heart beat faster, matching the rhythm of her old childhood memories. Somewhere deep inside, she could almost hear her mother's voice whispering, "Play, Mara, just play." And as she stood there, caught between her past and the present, the night quietly prepared to change her life forever. The ballroom sparkled like a dream. Golden lights hung from crystal chandeliers, and soft music played through hidden speakers while waiters moved smoothly between tables, carrying trays of drinks. Everyone looked beautiful, men in suits, women in gowns, their laughter filling the air like bubbles rising in champagne. It was the billionaire Mr. Han's 60th birthday, and the celebration was meant to be grand. The kind of event people talked about for weeks. Mara stood near the stage, holding her clipboard tightly against her chest. She wasn't there to celebrate. She was there to work. Her job was to make sure everything ran smoothly, the timing, the lights, the speeches, the performers. She watched as guests greeted Mr. Han with warm smiles and expensive gifts. He was tall, with kind eyes and silver hair, the sort of man who carried quiet power. When he spoke, people listened. Mara had seen him only in meetings before, but seeing him in person like this, laughing among friends, made her realize how different their worlds were. Still, she couldn't help feeling proud. Everything looked perfect. The decorations glowed, the flowers smelled sweet, and the program was on schedule. The only thing missing was the live pianist who was supposed to arrive by now. The black grand piano on the stage waited silently under the lights, slid open like a wing ready to fly. Mara checked her phone again. Still no message from the musician. She bit her lip nervously. The pianist had texted an hour ago saying his flight was delayed. He was stuck at the airport. There was nothing Mara could do but wait. Eric, her coworker, noticed her worried face and came over. grinning mischievously. "What's wrong, Mara? The decoration's not perfect enough for you?" he teased. "The pianist is late," she said softly. "He hasn't arrived yet." Eric laughed, shaking his head. "Oh, come on. It's just background music. Nobody will notice." He took a sip of his wine and looked toward the piano. "Hey, maybe you can play something. You're always humming in the office, right?" Mara froze. A few people nearby heard him and laughed. Someone added, "Yeah, give us a song, Mara. Show us what you've got." Her cheeks grew warm. No, I can't," she said quickly, her voice barely audible. But Eric was enjoying the attention. He raised his glass and said loudly, "Ladies and gentlemen, maybe we have a hidden star here. Let's hear it for Mara." People turned to look at her, clapping lightly, thinking it was all in good fun. Mara felt her heart racing. The thought of walking onto that stage made her knees weak. She wanted to disappear into the floor. Then, unexpectedly, the billionaire himself looked up from his table. He had been talking to a group of guests, but now watched the little scene unfolding with interest. "What's going on?" he asked with a gentle smile. Eric bowed slightly, pretending to be formal. "Just a little fun, sir. Our quiet assistant here, Maram, might know how to play. We're missing our pianist, so maybe she can help us out." Mara wanted to protest, to tell him it was just a silly joke, but her words stuck in her throat. The billionaire's gaze was kind, not mocking. He smiled and said, "Is that true, Ms. Lim? Do you play the piano?" She shook her head quickly. "I used to, sir." "A long time ago," he said, his eyes curious. "Then perhaps you could remind us what it feels like to hear a little music played from the heart." The crowd murmured with excitement. Some clapped lightly again. Others whispered, "Let her play." Mara's heart pounded louder with every second. Her palms were sweating. She tried to smile, but felt the corners of her lips tremble. Eric leaned close to her and whispered with a smirk, "Come on, it's just for fun. Play something simple." Mara's stomach twisted. She wasn't angry, just embarrassed and afraid. The piano was not just an instrument to her. It was part of a past she had locked away. She hadn't touched a piano since her mother's death. What if she had forgotten everything? What if she made a fool of herself in front of all these people? Mr. Hahn, still smiling warmly, said, "Don't be nervous. We're not expecting a concert. Just a song, maybe?" Music has a way of making an evening special. There was something in his tone, gentle but firm, that made it impossible to refuse. Slowly, she nodded. "All right," she whispered. A small cheer rose from the guests, and Eric grinned triumphantly. "That's the spirit," he said. As Mara walked toward the stage, every step felt heavy. The sound of her heels on the marble floor echoed louder than it should have. Her hands trembled as she climbed the short stairs. The lights above made her eyes squint. She could feel everyone's gaze on her. The grand piano waited silently under the spotlight. Its surface reflected her nervous face. She sat down carefully, her legs shaking under the long tablecloth of her dress. The bench felt strange beneath her, unfamiliar yet familiar at the same time. For a few seconds, she just stared at the keys, black and white, shining under the lights. Memories rushed back like waves. Her mother's voice, the warm living room of her old home, the soft touch of her mother's hand guiding hers. "Press gently, feel the note, let it breathe," her mother used to say. The crowd had gone quiet now. Even Eric had stopped smiling. The billionaire leaned forward in his chair, curious. Mara took a deep breath. She could still back out, she thought. She could laugh it off and walk away. But something inside her whispered that maybe this moment was meant to happen. Maybe life was giving her a chance to face what she had buried so long ago. Her fingers touched the keys, cold, smooth, familiar. For a moment, she just pressed one note. The sound floated softly across the room, delicate as a whisper. She closed her eyes. Then, without thinking, her fingers moved again. The first few notes were uncertain, like a child taking first steps. But then something clicked inside her. Her hands began to move faster, more confidently. A melody formed, beautiful, sad, and full of memory. It was the song her mother had written, the one she used to play when Mara was little. The song that had stayed locked in her heart all these years. The room grew completely silent. The laughter and chatter faded away. Only the piano spoke now. The notes rose and fell like a story, soft in some parts, aching in others. Each sound carried her memories, her love, her loss. People listened, stunned. Some closed their eyes. The billionaire's expression changed slowly from curiosity to something deeper. His eyes glistened as the melody filled the air. It was as if every note carried a piece of someone's soul, Mara's, her mother's, and maybe even his. Mara didn't see any of them. Her eyes stayed closed, her face calm but full of feeling. She wasn't playing for them. She was playing for her mother, for herself, the little girl who had lost her music so long ago. When the final note faded, a deep silence followed. No one moved. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. The sound grew until the entire hall erupted in applause. Some guests even stood up, their faces shining with emotion. Mara opened her eyes, dazed. She looked at the crowd, then at Mr. Han, who was wiping his eyes quietly. He stood and began to clap too, the sound echoing in the grand hall. Mara's heart was still racing. But now, it was not from fear. It was from something warm and bright spreading inside her. She had faced her fear. She had touched the piano again, and in that moment, she realized something. Sometimes life brings you back to what you love. Even if it takes years, and sometimes, even a cruel joke can lead you back to who you truly are. The sound that came from the piano was soft at first, like a whisper in a quiet room. Mara's hands were shaking, her breath shallow, but the moment her fingers touched the keys, something deep inside her started to wake up. She'd been afraid that she'd forgotten how to play, that her fingers would be stiff, her rhythm gone. But no, the piano seemed to remember her, and she remembered it. The sound that came out wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was full of feeling. It seemed to pull everyone's attention instantly. All around the grand ballroom, people stopped talking. The laughter faded, the clinking of glasses went silent. Even the waiters froze where they stood, holding trays in midair, their eyes drawn toward the stage. Nobody had expected much when the shy assistant sat down to play. Some had even smiled, thinking it was a silly little moment to pass the time. But as the music began to flow, their smiles faded, replaced by expressions of quiet wonder. Mara closed her eyes. She couldn't look at the crowd. She didn't want to see the faces watching her, judging her. She just wanted to lose herself in the sound. Her fingers moved slowly across the keys, one note blending into another. It was a melody she knew better than her own heartbeat, the song her mother had written. The song she hadn't touched in years. When Mara was a child, that song had filled their small apartment every evening. Her mother used to hum it while folding laundry or cooking dinner. It was a gentle tune, full of warmth and comfort. Her mother had said, "This song is like a window. Mara, even when life feels dark, you can look through it and still see light." But after her mother's sudden death, Mara couldn't play it anymore. Every note reminded her of the emptiness that followed the quiet house. The piano sitting untouched in the corner, the feeling that part of her heart had been buried with her mother now, sitting on that stage, surrounded by strangers. Mara let the music rise again. It came slowly at first, like a hesitant memory returning after years of silence. But then the notes grew stronger, fuller, as her confidence returned. Her hands moved gracefully, her body swaying slightly with the rhythm. The music flowed like water, carrying pieces of her past with it. The sound was full of emotions, pain, love, loss, and hope, all tangled together. Every note told a story, the laughter she shared with her mother, the day she lost her, the long years of silence that followed. She didn't have to speak. The piano spoke for her. Mr. Han, the billionaire whose party it was, sat near the front of the room, his glass of wine untouched. He had heard hundreds of performers in his life, some of the best musicians in the world. But this was different. This wasn't just skill or technique, it was soul. The music hit him somewhere deep, a place he hadn't opened in years. As the melody filled the room, memories began to flood his mind, 2 memories of his late wife, who used to play piano in their home before she fell ill. He remembered how she would smile when she played, how she believed that music could heal anything. Mr. Han felt his eyes sting, and before he realized it, a tear rolled down his cheek. Mara didn't see him or anyone else. Her eyes stayed closed, her head slightly tilted as she played. She was no longer in the ballroom. She was back in her old living room, sitting beside her mother. She could almost hear her voice, soft and loving. "Let the song carry your feelings, Mara. Don't play it, feel it." The room stayed completely silent, except for the sound of the piano. The melody rose higher now, filling the entire space. It wasn't just a song anymore. It was a story unfolding in sound. People could feel it in their chests, the way a strong wind moves through trees. Some didn't understand why they felt emotional. They only knew that something about the music touched their hearts. One woman at the front pressed a tissue to her eyes. A man sitting beside her leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring as if afraid to blink. Even the waiters at the back stood frozen. The warm plates in their hands forgotten. Mara's hands moved faster now, her body flowing with the rhythm. She had forgotten her fear, forgotten the crowd, forgotten everything but the music. Her heart and her hands were one. The melody rose and fell like the tide, gentle one moment and stormy the next. The notes sparkled like light on water, then turned soft and slow again. Every emotion she had locked away for years was pouring out of her grief. Love, loneliness, hope. She didn't fight it anymore. She let it flow. Tears slid down her cheeks, but she kept playing. It wasn't sadness anymore, it was release. She was finally letting go of all the pain she had carried in silence. Mr. Hahn's face was wet with tears now, though he didn't care. The song spoke directly to his heart. He thought about his wife's last words to him, how she had told him to keep music in his life, to never let the world turn him cold. Listening to Mara play, he felt like he was hearing his wife again, as if her spirit had returned through this young woman's hands. As the song reached its peak, the sound filled every corner of the room. It was powerful, beautiful, and heartbreaking all at once. It was as if the walls themselves were listening. And then, slowly, the melody began to soften. The storm inside the music calmed. The notes became gentler. Like a mother's whisper to her child, the last few notes came out like sighs, each one softer than the last. And then silence. The sound hung in the air for a moment before disappearing. The ballroom was still. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Mara sat frozen at the piano, her hands resting on the keys, her chest rising and falling with deep breaths. She didn't dare look up. She was afraid to see their faces, afraid to see laughter or pity. But when she finally lifted her head, what she saw made her heart stop. Everyone in the room was standing. The billionaire stood first, clapping slowly, his face wet with tears. The guests followed, their applause echoing through the hall. Some were crying openly. Others smiled through tears. It wasn't the loud, playful applause people gave for entertainment. It was soft, heartfelt. Full of gratitude, Mara sat still, too stunned to react. Then slowly, she stood and gave a small, shy bow. Her eyes glistened, her lips trembling between a smile and tears. Mr. Hahn walked up to her as the applause continued. He looked at her for a long moment, trying to find words, but none came. Finally, he said softly, "That music. It carried something I lost long ago." "Thank you." Mara looked at him, speechless. All she could do was nod. The crowd continued to clap, their faces shining with emotion. Some were wiping their eyes. Others were patting their chests as if trying to calm their hearts. Mara's co-workers, who had teased her earlier, now stood silently. Guilt and amazement mixed on their faces. She looked back at the piano, her reflection shimmering on its polished surface. It no longer felt like a stranger to her. It felt like coming home. In that moment, she understood something powerful. Music had never left her. It had only been waiting. Waiting for the right moment, the right courage, the right reason to return. And tonight, it finally had. For a few seconds after the last note faded, there was only silence. A deep, heavy silence that filled the entire ballroom like a blanket. It was as if everyone was holding their breath, afraid that even the smallest sound might break the spell that still hung in the air. Mara sat at the piano, her hands resting gently on the keys, her heart beating fast but steady. She didn't dare look up. She could feel the heat of the lights on her skin, the weight of hundreds of eyes watching her. But she couldn't move. Then, slowly, a sound broke the stillness. One pair of hands began to clap. It was soft at first, almost hesitant. Then another joined, then another. Within seconds, the entire room erupted in applause. The sound was loud, powerful, and full of emotion. Some people stood, others stayed seated with tears in their eyes, clapping with all their strength. The applause rolled through the hall like a wave, rising and falling as people shouted words like beautiful and amazing. Mara looked up finally, her eyes wide in disbelief. She had never expected this. She thought people would laugh, or maybe give a polite clap to be kind. But this was real. They weren't clapping out of manners. They were clapping because they had felt something. Because her music had touched them. She stood slowly and gave a small bow, her face still red from emotion. The billionaire, Mr. Han, had risen to his feet too. His expression was gentle, but his eyes were wet. He clapped slowly, deliberately, and when Mara's gaze met his, he smiled a soft, heartfelt smile that said more than words ever could. When the applause finally began to fade, Mr. Han stepped forward. The room quieted again, giving him space as he walked toward the stage. He moved slowly, not as a powerful businessman, but as a man deeply moved. Mara felt nervous again. She had no idea what he was going to say. He stopped near the piano, looking at her with genuine admiration. His voice, when he spoke, was low but filled with emotion. "That," he said, pausing to take a breath, "was the most beautiful thing I have heard in many years." Mara looked down shyly, unable to meet his eyes. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. "What was that song?" he asked softly. It sounded like it carried someone's soul. Mara hesitated. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "It was my mother's composition," she said. "She wrote it before she passed away." A murmur went through the crowd. Some people gasped quietly. Mr. Han's eyes softened even more. "Your mother must have been an incredible woman," he said. "She was," Mara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "She taught me everything I know about music. But I stopped playing after she died." Mr. Han nodded slowly. "I can understand that," he said, his gaze distant now, as if remembering something painful. "When someone you love leaves, even the things that once made you happy can start to hurt." Mara looked up at him, surprised. She hadn't expected someone like him, a billionaire. A man who seemed to have everything to speak words that felt so personal. He smiled gently. "But tonight," he continued, "you gave us all a gift. You reminded us that some feelings never really disappear. They just wait for the right moment to return." People around the room nodded, their faces still soft with emotion. The atmosphere had changed completely. The laughter and noise from earlier were gone, replaced by warmth and quiet respect. Even Eric, the coworker who had teased her, stood frozen near the back, his usual smirk nowhere to be seen. His eyes were wide, filled with guilt and disbelief. He had thought it would be funny to make her play. Now he couldn't even meet her eyes. Mara's heart was still racing, but in a different way now. The fear and embarrassment were gone. In their place was a strange, glowing feeling, like something heavy inside her had been lifted. She felt light, almost free. Mr. Han took a step closer. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward her hand. Mara nodded, unsure of what he meant. He reached out and gently held her hand in both of his. His voice was quiet but strong. "Your music spoke to all of us tonight," he said. "And to me, it spoke directly to the heart. You see, I lost someone I loved a long time ago too. Listening to you play brought her back just for a moment. That is something no money in the world could buy." Mara felt tears rising again, not from sadness this time, but from something deeper, something that felt like gratitude. "Thank you, sir," she said softly. He smiled and let go of her hand. "No, thank you," he said simply. Then he turned to the crowd and raised his glass. "To Ms. Lim," he announced, "and to the kind of beauty that comes only from the heart." The crowd lifted their glasses too, repeating her name with warm smiles. "To Mara," they said together. The sound filled the ballroom like music. Mara's coworkers looked at her differently now. The same people who had ignored her, who had seen her as just a quiet assistant, were now clapping and smiling with respect. Some of them even looked ashamed. Eric stepped forward slowly, his face red. "Mara," he said awkwardly, I didn't mean to embarrass you. That was incredible, truly." Mara gave him a small, forgiving smile. "It's all right," she said. "Maybe it was meant to happen." He nodded, still speechless. The event continued, but the energy in the room had completely changed. The mood was softer, kinder. People talked quietly, sharing how moved they were by the music. Some even went up to Mara to thank her personally. She wasn't used to so much attention, but she accepted it with grace, her heart still glowing from the experience. Later that night, when most guests had left, the lights dimmed, and only a few people remained, Mara walked back to the piano. She touched the keys again, just lightly this time. The surface was cool and smooth under her fingertips. She smiled to herself. For so many years, she had avoided this feeling, afraid that touching a piano would break her heart all over again. But now she realized something that hadn't broken her. It had healed her. As she sat there quietly, she noticed Mr. Han watching her from across the room. He walked over once more. "Ms. Lim," he said kindly, "I want to thank you again. I mean it when I say you changed the mood of this entire evening. You reminded me of something I had forgotten, that real talent doesn't come from fame or training or money. It comes from truth." Mara blushed, unsure how to respond. "I only played my mother's song," she said. He smiled. "And that's exactly why it was so powerful. It was real." He paused, then added, "I'd like to speak with you again tomorrow. Perhaps over coffee. I have an idea I'd like to discuss with you." Mara nodded, though she didn't understand what he meant. "Of course, sir." As he left, she sat quietly at the piano for a few more minutes. The ballroom was empty now, the echoes of her music still floating in the air. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like the quiet assistant in the corner. She felt like herself, the real Mara, the one her mother had believed in, the one who had something beautiful to share with the world. And as she closed the piano lid gently, she smiled through her tears. Tonight, she hadn't just played music. She had found her voice again. The next morning, the sun rose softly over the city, painting the tall glass buildings with gold. Mara woke up earlier than usual. For a few seconds, she lay still, her eyes open, but her mind half lost in the memory of last night. It almost felt like a dream: the lights, the crowd, the music, the applause. And the billionaire standing up with tears in his eyes. She had never seen anything like it, never imagined it could happen to her. The memory made her heart beat faster. Her small apartment was quiet except for the sound of traffic outside. She got up slowly and walked to the window. The morning light touched her face, and she smiled faintly. Something inside her felt new, lighter. It was as if she had left a part of her pain behind in that ballroom. For years, she had avoided her piano at home. It had sat in the corner under a white sheet, untouched. But today, for the first time, she wanted to play again. She walked over to it, her fingers trembling slightly as she pulled away the sheet. The instrument was dusty, but still beautiful. She sat down and pressed one key. The note was soft but warm, like an old friend greeting her after a long time apart. A small tear rolled down her cheek, but she was smiling. She began to play a few gentle notes, just to hear the sound. It wasn't the full song, just a whisper of it. But it felt right. It felt like home. Later that morning, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Mr. Han's assistant, inviting her to meet the billionaire for coffee at his office. Mara's hands shook as she read it. She dressed carefully, a clean blouse, simple trousers, and took the bus downtown, her heart pounding the entire way. When she arrived at the company's headquarters, everything looked the same as usual: the shiny floors, the busy people, but everyone who saw her greeted her differently. Some smiled warmly, some nodded with respect. Word about the gala had spread through the building like wildfire. The quiet assistant who had once gone unnoticed was now the person everyone was talking about. When she entered Mr. Hahn's office, he greeted her with the same gentle smile she remembered from last night. He stood by the window, a cup of tea in his hand. "Ah, Ms. Lim," he said, "please, sit down." She sat carefully, feeling nervous but curious. "I wanted to thank you again," he said, turning toward her. "Your performance yesterday wasn't just music hit, was truth. It reminded me, and everyone else in that room, that emotion is the heart of everything. I haven't felt that kind of peace in years." Mara didn't know what to say. She just smiled and said softly, "I'm glad it meant something to you, sir." He nodded. "It meant more than you think." He paused for a moment, then continued, "I have an offer for you, Mara. Every year, our company hosts charity events to help children who can't afford music lessons. We raise funds, but the performances are always formal, professional, and lifeless. I want you to be part of something new. I want you to perform at these events. Maybe even help us start a small music scholarship in your mother's name. What do you think?" Mara's eyes widened. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "A scholarship? In my mother's name?" She whispered, "Yes," he said with a kind smile. "Your mother's song changed us last night. I think it should change more lives." Tears welled in her eyes. I don't know what to say, sir." "Say yes," he said simply, "and promise to keep playing." Mara nodded slowly, her heart full. "Yes," she said, "I promise." From that day on, Mara's life began to change. She still worked at the company, but her days were no longer silent. Mr. Hahn made sure she had time to practice and perform at special events. She played at charity dinners, at schools, and in hospitals where children listened with wide eyes and open hearts. Each time she played, she saw her mother's smile in her mind and felt proud that her music was bringing comfort to others. People started to recognize her. Some newspapers even wrote short articles about the assistant whose music made a billionaire cry. But fame didn't matter to her. What mattered was that she was finally doing what she loved again and doing it for a reason that felt pure at night. When she came home, she would sit by her piano with a cup of tea and think about how far she had come. Sometimes she laughed softly at the memory of how it all started, a cruel joke at a fancy party. What was meant to embarrass her had become the turning point of her life. Her co-worker, Eric Sixa, who had teased her that night, became a lot quieter after the gala. A few days later, he walked up to her in the office, looking nervous. "Mara," he said, "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I shouldn't have made that joke. I didn't know you were." He paused, searching for the right words. "You're incredible," Mara smiled kindly. "It's all right, Eric," she said. "If you hadn't said anything, I might never have played again." He looked surprised, then laughed a little. "You're too nice," he said. "I just believe things happen for a reason." She replied softly. As the months passed, Mara continued to grow. She started writing her own pieces, inspired by her mother's song, but full of her own voice. Her melodies were gentle, hopeful, sometimes sad, but always honest. People who heard her play said her music made them feel understood, as if someone had reached inside their heart and turned their emotions into sound. Mr. Hahn kept his promise. The Evelyn Lim Music Scholarship, named after Mara's mother, was launched that year. The program paid for instruments and lessons for underprivileged children who dreamed of learning music. On the day it was announced, Mara played her mother's song on stage once again, this time in front of hundreds of people. And just like before, the room fell silent, moved by the purity of her music. When she finished, she looked up and saw Mr. Hahn in the front row, clapping with pride. She also saw children smiling, their eyes full of hope. It filled her heart with warmth. After the ceremony, she walked home alone under the city lights. The night air was cool, and the world felt peaceful. For the first time in years, she wasn't haunted by sadness when she thought about her mother. Instead, she felt close to her, as if her mother was walking beside her, proud and happy. When she reached home, she sat at her piano again, her fingers tracing the keys gently. She whispered, "Thank you, Mom, for teaching me how to feel through music, for never letting me forget who I am." She played softly then, a new melody forming under her hands. It was not her mother's song this time, it was her own. A song of healing, of courage, of finding light again after years of darkness. As the music filled her small apartment, Mara smiled. Her life had changed completely, but not because of luck or money. It had changed because, in one moment of courage, she had faced her fear and let her heart speak, and in doing so, she had not only found herself again, she had reminded everyone who heard her that the truest kind of music is the one that comes from love. That night, before going to bed, she looked out the window and whispered softly to the stars, "I'll keep playing, Mom, always." The city lights shimmered below, and somewhere far away, a soft wind carried the echo of her song, a song born from pain but now filled with peace.